So let's now posit for a moment that one of the pillars of longevity is minimizing mortality from cancer. So where does screening fit into this? Well, screening is one of three pieces that you would envision, right? The first piece would be, how do you prevent cancer? The second thing would be, how do you screen for cancer and detect it early? And I'll explain why I think that's necessary. And the third is, how do you treat it when you have it? So we can talk a lot about the former. How do you prevent cancer? We've had many podcasts, and we have many podcasts coming up where we're going to get into the treatments of cancer. But I want to focus this one on the prevention piece. So why do I believe that? Well, this is a controversial topic, I want to say first. So not all people believe that screening matters. But I think the simplest explanation for why screening matters is the evidence that suggests that a cancer that is caught earlier is easier to treat than a cancer that is caught later. In other words, if you catch a breast cancer or a colon cancer when there are tens of millions or hundreds of millions of cancer cells, your odds of treating that successfully are better than if you catch the same cancer years later when there are billions of cells. And the evidence for that basically comes from examining how patients respond to the exact same drugs in the adjuvant setting versus in the metastatic setting. So what does that mean? So the adjuvant setting is when a drug is given to a patient who has no visible cancer. So these are patients that may have had the visible cancer removed. You believe that they have microscopic disease that remains, and you give them a drug like Herceptin for a HER2/neu positive breast cancer. And if you compare the outcomes of those patients to the outcomes of patients who were given the exact same drug for the exact same phenotype and genotype of the cancer, but in the metastatic setting, there's no comparison in the outcomes. And one explanation for that may be that the more mature cancers, the ones that have been around longer, have developed more mutations. They are more difficult to treat. So it is therefore my belief that the more we can do to screen for cancer and catch it earlier, the better we will be. But we do pay a price for that. We pay a financial price for that. In other words, it costs money to screen early. And we pay potentially an emotional price from that, because as we'll get to, and you alluded to, we have to now get into false positives and false negatives. But at a high level, Bob, that's how I think about this cancer, or this topic around cancer screening.
Yeah, I think it's telling too. If you look at statistics on that, they call it 5-year survival. So what are the odds of you surviving a cancer? And then if you look at specific cancers like breast cancer, you're talking about you catch it early and it's a local cancer. It hasn't metastasized, and the statistics on that is the 5-year survival rates are about 99%. And then you go to a distant cancer, so a metastatic breast cancer, and it's closer to about 25% in terms of the 5-year survival. And also what you alluded to as well, the false positives, false negatives. I said I alluded to that. So that gets into sensitivity, specificity, and I didn't mention this, but positive predictive value, negative predictive value. And I think it probably would be helpful to go into that. And I think pictures are probably worth 1,000 words in this case, in terms of looking at how good a screening tool is and determining that stuff, sensitivity, specificity, et cetera.
So do you want to start with just start explaining those things?
Thank you for listening to today's sneak peek AMA episode of The Drive. If you're interested in hearing the complete version of this AMA, you'll want to become a member. We created the membership program to bring you more in-depth exclusive content without relying on paid ads. Membership benefits are many, and beyond the complete episodes of the AMA each month, they include the following: ridiculously comprehensive podcast show notes that detail every topic, paper, person, and thing we discuss on each episode of The Drive. access to our private podcast feed, the Qualies, which are a super short podcast, typically less than 5 minutes, released every Tuesday through Friday, which highlight the best questions, topics, and tactics discussed on previous episodes of The Drive. This is particularly important for those of you who haven't heard all of the back episodes. It becomes a great way to go back and filter and decide which ones you want to listen to in detail. Really steep discount codes for products I use and believe in, but for which I don't get paid to endorse, and benefits that we continue to add over time. If you want to learn more and access these member-only benefits, head over to peterattiamd.com/subscribe. Lastly, if you're already a member, but you're hearing this, it means you haven't downloaded our member-only podcast feed where you can get the full access to the AMA and you don't have to listen to this. You can download that at peterattiamd.com/members. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all with the ID Peter Attia MD. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast player you listen on. This podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, I take conflicts of interest very seriously. For all of my disclosures and the companies I invest in or advise, please visit peterattiamd.com/about, where I keep an up-to-date and active list of such companies.